Hello students, in this video lesson, we will be discussing on the poem The Slave's Dream, written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Now, this poem has 8 stanzas. Each stanza consists of 6 lines each. Okay. Before I continue further, I want you to Google the biographical background of the poet as well, as it will help you to enhance your knowledge about the poet and at the same time the poem as well. Okay. Now, this poem was written at a time when the concept and practice of slavery system existed. Okay, so you can also go through the introduction of the poet and the poem in your text. And before we start with the poem, I want you to open your text and follow along as I read the lines. Lines 1 to 6. Beside the ungathered rice he lay, his sickle in his hand, his breast was bare, his matted hair was buried in the sand. Again in the mist and shadow of sleep, he saw his native land. Now, the poet makes it crystal clear in the first stanza itself that he is talking about a slave. Okay. Now, to give you more insight about the word slave, now let me just tell you the meaning of a slave and a servant. Okay. Now, a servant has a right to say no at times. Okay, a servant has the right to leave his job if he's not satisfied, but a slave has no right of his own. If his master wants to sell him off, then his master can do so. He has no right to say no to his master. Okay, so in other words, a slave is just like a tool in the hands of his master. Now, in the first and the second line, we come across words like ungathered rice and sickle in his hand, which indicates an incomplete dusk. Okay, an incomplete dusk. Now the third and the fourth lines also gives a clear picture of how he is lying on the ground. He was shirtless, and in the third line you see matted hair, right? Which means he probably never had a haircut or never been washed properly. Now here we get to realize that the slave has fainted out of extreme fatigue or tiredness. Okay. Now the fifth and the sixth line simply means that as he fainted, he dreams of his homeland. I want you to focus on the word again. Okay, in the fifth line again. This word asserts that this word asserts the point that he or the slave have always missed his homeland, and even at this point he dreams of his native land again. Okay. The second stanza, wide through the landscape of his dreams, the lordly Niger flowed beneath the palm trees on the plain. Once more again he strode and heard the dingling caravans descend the mountain road. Now, the first stanza ends with a note that he dreamt of his native land, right? Now, in this second stanza, we get to clearly picture his native land. Now we get to learn that his homeland is Africa, according to the second line of the second stanza, Niger, right? Okay, you can see in your glossary part also Niger means a river in one of the river in Western Africa. Okay, as the slave strides along this river and the plains, and perhaps he was the king of a tribe of his land. Okay, as he strides along the plains, he hears the sound of a caravan descending from the mountain road. Okay, the word caravan has different aspects, like in the Western countries, as shown in the picture. It's a vehicle that has all the utilities of a house. Okay, it has a toilet, it has a bathroom, it has a kitchen, right? They carry this vehicle if they have to go on a trip for weeks or even months. Okay, likewise, in the olden days, there were a group of businessmen or circus performing groups who move from one city to another. Okay, some places they use horse or donkeys or camels depending on the place they live in. So I hope that is clear. During the olden times, we see that there are a group of people who goes from one city to another, like for business purpose, right, or for maybe circus, okay, doing shows and all. So when they move from one city to another, they need to protect themselves, right? So they moved in groups. So you must have also seen a picture or maybe in a television where they carry a lot of things and then move from one place to another. Okay, likewise in Africa they use camel. Okay, they use camel, so in groups they will move from one place to another. So in Africa, camel is like the sheep of the desert, right? Okay, so they use camel instead. Now I will read the third paragraph of this poem. He saw once more his dark-eyed queen. Among her children stand, they clasped his neck, they kissed his cheeks, they held him by the hand. A tear burst from the sleeper's lids and fell into the sand. Now, the third stanza introduces us to his family. Okay, here he sees his dark eyed queen who stands along with their children. He dreams of how they clasped his neck, kissed his cheeks, and held him by his hand. Now, such was the intensity of his dream that tears formed in his eyes, okay, even in his sleep. And this futile tear drops onto the sand and is absorbed by the sand, okay. Fourth stanza. And then at furious speed he rode along the Niger's bank. His bridle reins were golden chains, and with a martial clank, at each leap he could feel his scabbard of steel smiting his stallion's flank. Now, in the fourth stanza, we see how he perceives his life as a free man. Okay, we see in this stanza that he rides a horse at a very furious speed, right, along the river Niger bank. In the fourth stanza, we can easily picture a man riding a horse, right? So we can see that the slave is in his dream. Okay, he is directing the horse with the golden bridle, and his scabbard of steel is hitting the body of his horse at each leap the horse is taking. Now, the fifth stanza. Before him, like a blood red flag, the bright flamingos flew from morning till night. He followed their flight over plains where the tamarind grew, till he saw the roofs of Caffre huts and the ocean rose to view. Now, the fifth stanza is quite simple. The fifth stanza is a continuation of the fourth stanza. Okay. Now, in the fourth stanza, we see that he was riding a horse, right? We see the picture of the slave in his dream riding a horse. Now, in this fifth stanza, we see that the slave who is free in his dream rides a horse along the river bank and come across a flamboyance of flamingos, which looked like a blood red flag. Now, he followed their flight until he saw the ocean. Okay. Now, the sixth stanza. At night he heard the lion roar and the hyena scream, and the river horse as he crushed the reeds beside some hidden stream, and it passed like a glorious roll of drums through the triumph of his dream. Now, in the sixth stanza, the poet talks about his native land, and we also see the lush wild animals and abundant richness of nature in this very stanza. Okay, to support that point, we can see the richness through the lines first and second and third, this whole stanza, that we can hear the lions roar, right, a hyena scream, and he also pictures himself crushing the reeds, and then the glorious roll of drums refers to the group of horse passing. Okay, the sounds produced by their footfall. Okay, when horses run, right, in groups, the sounds produced by their footfall is like that of a of the drums rolling past his resting place. Okay, so his dream is triumphant because it successfully gives him a sense of freedom and happiness. Okay, because which he acquires through his dream. Now, the seventh stanza. The forests with their myriad tongues shouted of liberty, and the blast of the desert cried aloud with a voice so wild and free that he started in his sleep and smiled at their tempestuous glee. Now, the seventh stanza once again portrays how the forest of his mind, with all their voices, shout out his soul's desire, that is liberty. Okay. Um, why use the word myriad tongues? Okay. Now, if you see in your glossary, if you see the meaning of the myriad, it means many. Okay. Now, the different voices in the forest, like maybe the forest doesn't literally speak like a human being, but maybe the voices of the forest, like of birds, of insects, of animals, of the wind brushing through the trees, or of the stream, right? All these sounds shout out for his liberty. Okay, so the myriad tongues not literally means the forest speaks, but he's just talking about the different sounds that is in the forest. Okay, like of, I've already told you, of birds, of insects, of wild animals, right? Of the winds brushing through the trees, of the stream. Okay, all these sounds shouts out for the liberty of the slave. Okay, now even the cry of the turbulent blast of the desert in the third line, okay, in the third line of the seventh paragraph, echoes through his being. Okay, now if you have seen in the movies, you must have heard the strong blast of wind in the desert, right? Okay, so it's just referring to this one. So this was so wild and free. Okay, this was so wild and free, which also, echoes the slave's desire to be wild and free. Okay, because since he's a slave, but he wants to acquire, right, freedom, all indicating his deep desire for freedom. Now, the slave's dream about such freedom makes him smile even in his unconscious state. So you will see in the fifth and the sixth line, right, of the seventh stanza. Now, the eighth stanza: he did not feel the driver's whip, nor the burning heat of day, for death had illumined the land of sleep, and his lifeless body lay, a worn out fetter that the soul had broken and thrown away. Now, in the last stanza, the poet returns to the physical condition of the slave. Okay. Now, in the first stanza, we see that the poet was actually talking about the physical condition of the slave, right? How he was lying, how the uncattered rice, how his sickle in his hand, right? How he was lying, how his face was buried in the sand. So he talks about his physical state, but starting from the second paragraph till the seventh paragraph, the poet talks about his his dream. Okay, the slave's dream. Now, in the eighth stanza, the poet again returns to the physical state of the slave. Now, after the series of wonderful dreams that we follow along the slave's dream, we are hit back by the shock in the last stanza that this was his last breath. Okay, so he was taking his last breath. Now, he smiled unconsciously because he knew he was getting freedom, right? Not in real life, but at least through death. Okay, he was getting freedom. Now, in line 1 and 2 of the last stanza, we get to see that his numb and senseless body could no longer feel the hits from the whip by his master. Okay, nor could he feel the scorching heat of the sun. The word fetter in the fifth line, okay, of the last stanza mean the chains around the person's feet. Okay, through his death, his soul has broken this chain of slavery and attained freedom. So, in short, this is what the poem means. In lines 4 and 5 of the 8th stanza, the poet compares the worn out fetter to the lifeless body of the slave, okay? And his lifeless body lay a worn out fetter, right? So, anybody who has been in chains for many years, if he is released, he'll be really happy and he will describe himself as a free man, right? Likewise, the slave's body is the fetter, okay? Not just a fetter, but an old one, a worn out fetter, right? In the fifth line of the last stanza. So, finally, the soul of the slave has been released from his or this physical prison and is now free. Okay, so that is what it means in this last stanza. He is now a free man, at least after his death. Okay, so that is what it means. Now, before I conclude, I would like to explain the first paragraph in short, some of the important symbols or meanings there. Okay. Now, in the first paragraph, the third line, his bare breast represents the barrenness of his life, okay, as a slave. And his method here, buried in the sand, symbolizes death slowly creeping over his exhausted body. Okay, as he sleeps, he sees his once again native land in dreams. So I want you to remember the significance of this line, his bare breast, okay, and his method here. And even in the last paragraph, the line a worn out fetter, right? Okay, that is important because it is a it is an indication to the worn out body of the slave, okay, or the lifeless body of the slave, who is now free, okay, who is now, whose soul is now free from the physical bondage of the earth. So that is the significance of this very line. So I want you to go through this poem once again by your own, and then you can listen this explanation again and again if you want. And if you have any doubts, you can always clarify. Okay, so that is all for this lesson. Till then, stay safe.